This is the Made for Living Well podcast, hosted by Alexa Sherm, the place to create a life well lived.
Welcome back to the podcast. As always, my name's Alexa, and I'm so glad you're here. I am beyond grateful for you. And as we come to the end of another new year, I literally feel so honored to be doing this job, to be sharing information with you. And I do not take it lightly that we are 350 some episodes in, and man, what a journey and a joy and an absolute honor it has been to show up every week and be able to provide you insight and to offer you wisdom and encouragement and direction on your life. I spent so much time trying to understand how to better help you that I really don't take it lightly. And it is my life's purpose and mission to continue forward with providing you information that can really help alter and shape your life in a more positive way. Now, I have some really exciting things moving into the new year, and I'm going to share those at the end of this podcast to get you a little bit more excited. As I evaluated some of the top podcasts of the year, I think it really shows what you're looking for. And maybe you wouldn't articulate it like this, but what I found is deep down, I think we all have a sense and desire to be well. We want to be healthy, and we absolutely have the tools inside of us to do that. Unfortunately, the process of living those out takes a lot of unlearning a lot of the diet ideas and the tools that have been established that really don't have a good rapport inside your biology. We've spent many weeks out of the year breaking down dieting and really understanding your body in a new way. And to prove that it's not just dieting that's the problem. In fact, we have a biological drive to diet. And I'm going to share more about that inside this podcast, especially based on what I'm learning. But even more, on some capacity, we all need health. It's just, how do we show up in a way that's actually going to create positive change? Like, how do we use it for good? And in my own personal life, I've really evaluated the things that I'm doing and understanding, is this actually helping? Or is this just repeating the hamster wheel of actions that we've learned throughout life to do because on some level, that's what we think we have to do? Now, I don't want to get too deep right away. What I'm trying to say is I've done a lot of evaluation and I am so excited going into the new year. Like, we are taking health to a new level that maybe is going to twist it back to really focus on your personal journey with health and the story your body is telling, because that matters more than anything else. Now, as we get into today's podcast, I just want to remind you that I'm also sharing a little bit more details over in the blog post that goes along with today's show at thelivingwell.com. And even deeper is my dive over at the Weekly Fill, the newsletter, the home, the hubbub of my personal journey and my connection with you. So make sure if you haven't signed up for that newsletter, you do so at The Living Well, or you can just find it at thelivingwell.com, and it's called The Weekly Fill. I think you're really going to love it. I've coined it the one place where you can get happy and healthy all in the same place. So make sure you check those out. But for now, let's get right into today's podcast because I have so much I want to share with you. Now, it might be cliche and kind of overrated, but I really do love this time of the year. I love it for a lot of reasons, not just because I love the holidays, but I love like the reflection process and the excitement for starting something new and the excitement for maybe just challenging the norms or challenging the way that you've been going about life and committing to doing something different. Now, if you've been here for a while, you know that I'm not a huge fan of resolutions or maybe even goal setting, to say the least. It's not to say that that doesn't serve a purpose, but I think we have to be really careful about what we choose to set goals for, and specifically, maybe not so much for health. And I say that because sometimes when we do that, we get so lost inside the external pursuit, the chase of health, the destination, that we really miss what is our body looking for and what does it need to actually change. And that's why I say maybe goals aren't the best thing for the health space. Like maybe they're reserved for other areas of life, other projects and places that you actually do want to get to. But in the span of health, I think goals generally really dismiss what it means to live healthy. And when we dismiss and overlook it, it becomes a really difficult thing to ever actually achieve. Now, I'm not going to get into too much about that in this podcast because I do have other podcasts that talk about breaking up with goal setting and other ways to approach health. And in the process of this year, I have to say that one of the biggest things that I've learned is the process and the approach to health completely changes the outcomes that you experience. Now, of course, I knew this and we've talked about this, but I really paid attention to it in my own life and how I went about my daily life. And like all things, it just comes back to understanding what is working well and then choosing to do something different within that. Not necessarily completely overhauling the life, but just making simple little shifts. And as I look at health in our body, and I think one big missing component that we fail to understand is that in order to change, to create something different, we have to have capacity to do so. Like we can only change to the degree our body is supported and has the tools to change. Like there's a system involved. And I think we overlook that system or those tools in effort to arrive at some place that we think we need to get to. And I know this is hard work because that involves a lot of unlearning. Like it really does involve completely changing the definition of health from this place you arrive to the daily actions that you take. And this just came to mind, but in the last newsletter I wrote, and I think I posted it on Instagram as well, I said, I think we need to stop confusing healing with results. Because while results take time, they're definitely not immediate and maybe not the best picture overall of healing. Healing can happen immediately. Healing happens based on what you do right now. You might not feel it, you might not see it, but every action you take in support of your body is actually helping it to heal. And I don't want to dismiss that or lose that because we're so focused on external things. But that means we really do have to pay attention to our body and pay attention to what it needs. And when we pay attention to its needs, we can support it in a way that it actually has the capacity to change. And really, that's so critically important as we move forward into the new year. Like just stopping and asking yourself, am I living life in a way that I offer the capacity to change? Am I living life in a way that I have the capacity to do new things? Do I have the capacity to engage in healthy relationships? Or do I have the capacity to engage in relationships at all? And really, as I have evaluated our life space overall today, I think there's a lot of misconceptions that we really tend to overlook. And I don't even want to say misconceptions. I think untruths that we have been led to believe are true. And one of those is this drive for independence. But I think our independent lives and our lack of connection is one of the leading reasons why we're not getting healthy overall. And next year, we're going to talk a lot about metabolic health and boosting your metabolism and your energy, which is the foundation of all of health. And a lot of it comes back to how connected are you? Which brings me to my first thing that I have to say that went really, really well this year. It went well and it didn't. So this is going to be on both ends of the spectrum, and I think that's okay. I think one thing in my life that I evaluated that I was like, yes, this made a huge difference was my focus on relationships. And I don't mean that I grew a lot of new relationships, but I really started to build community and almost like tribes with some people in my life. Some of them were family members, some of them were friends. And really, even this focus on building our marriage in a healthier way. And I have to say that what I've recognized in the world, it's really easy to put down relationships. It's really easy to dismiss them. It's really easy to talk poorly about them. It's really easy to talk poorly about my husband. And I think about this like in the sex space where everyone kind of makes the excuse of like, I don't want to have sex. Like I don't want to do that. Like after you're married, it just fizzles away. But that's not how it should be, right? Like that's not what it should take And even when we look at intimacy and physical connections with someone you love, you have to have capacity in order to feel that, and in order to nourish that. In order to want to have sex, on some level, you have to be nourished to want it. I won't get into it here, but in the new year, we're going to talk about how this is one of the leading reasons of infertility. Is people don't have the capacity because they're not nourished to actually conceive, to actually carry a child, to bring new life into the world. And so while relationships, marriage, friendships have been normalized to be called hard and challenging and maybe even to fizzle out into adulthood, like I really wanted to challenge that norm and challenge that stereotype, and really this year just start to foster some of those relationships, both with my husband and with my friends and with my family. And I have to say, it was one of the most joyous years that I can remember. Like, I have spent so many years wishing for the next stage that I had no ability and no capacity to just show up in my present life. And that made me miss so much. Like, I was here, but I wasn't here. And this year, I really made a commitment to just being present. And I have to tell you that while also difficult, because that's uncomfortable, because when you show up in the present, you have to deal with the present and all that it brings, the good, the bad, the hard, the uncomfortable. And it's a little awkward at first. Like, I had to learn how to be in the present. And that sounds crazy, but it's true. And the more I got acquainted with it, the more I fell in love with it. And I have to say that as the year ends, I feel more content in my life than I've ever been. Which also brings up another lesson, that contentment is not the same thing as complacency. Like, I am very content, but in the process of that contentment, I actually have this like deep desire to grow and to learn and to become better. I didn't think that those things would go hand in hand. Like, I think inside, I really believe that contentment was a sense of complacency. Like, I'm just good. Like, I don't need anything else. But I really found that my deep contentment with life has made me want to become better. And I didn't expect that, but I'm pleasantly surprised by that. And so I do have a deeper desire and drive to want to change some of the existing patterns in my life that aren't necessarily healthy or helpful. I'm going to talk about some of those things that I'm going to leave behind in 2024 and really set new patterns with coming up. But first, again, like I said, I think the relationship aspect has been really great for me, and also being more present-minded. Now, what also is really beneficial about the presence is that that is where your body feels the safest. And if we're going to look at health across the board, the one critical element that must be established in order to heal, in order to change, in order to fully live vibrant and healthy is that you have to have a sense of safety inside your biology. Yes, energy, you need energy, but energy is established through the sense of safety. And the best way, or the way that your body feels safe, is being in the present. The presence and feeling safe right where you are is the determining factor of safety inside your biology. That might seem crazy, but if you think about it, your body is constantly taking in senses, right? Like your body is one big sensory unit that is not taking in your 5-year plans. Your mind might be there, but your body is here. So it's constantly taking in and sensing how safe you are in the present moment. And if you're not here to understand how safe do you actually feel in your environment, how safe do you feel in your body, it's going to be really difficult to ever create the change. And I think that's why people get so stuck in their 5-year plans and their long-term ideas and these 6-week plans or 90-day eating habits and these diets, is because we're kind of escaping our present life, hoping to find safety in something else. But really, it's just perpetrating the problem. Like, it's just cycling through this vicious cycle that never ends because we don't understand that right here, where we are, is the most important place to create safety. And so living in the present has had a multitude of different benefits for my body, for my life, for my relationships. Like, it really has changed so much. And in a way, it's allowed me to soften to life, to really just kind of break down the walls that I had established to keep me protected. And next year, we're going to learn a lot more about this, but all of those emotions and those protective mechanisms are connected to different organ systems and different nutrients inside the body, specifically minerals, and how changing your demeanor can actually change your nutrient quality of your biology. It can change the way your cells respond because it's changing how your body is using the different nutrients. And if you can use them in a more positive way, you can completely alter your biology. So your biology is, yes, partly what you take in, but it's how your body uses what you take in. And how your body uses what you take in is a lot established by your perspective, by your way of life. Like, it's a cyclical pattern, everything is. And I think this year, one of the things that worked really well was just, again, being able to change the pattern, which my old pattern was very resistant to change. It was resistant to new things. It was more black and white. It had a little bit harder time finding the flexibility in life. It was more skeptical, and it definitely was a little bit more rebellious in a way. And it might seem like those words don't necessarily go together, but I do have to say that I found more flexibility. I've found more ability to expand and to see beyond the black and white. I definitely have more ability to just be content in all of life. And so those have been some things that have really come out of living more present. And honestly, like, you might be like, well, how did you do that? Like, it's literally nothing but a choice. I think one of the best quotes that I heard all year was, a pattern is only a pattern until you recognize it. And as soon as you recognize it, it becomes a choice. And I realized I had a really strong pattern of living for the future, of connecting my current reality to something different, chasing something different, living for a destination. That was a pattern of mine. And I think that's a pattern of a lot of people's. For no fault of yours, oftentimes this is just learned behavior. Like, we've learned and established from a very young age, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do with your life? Like, have these big long-term plans, go chase it. But we have very little awareness of how are we just living today that's going to help us get there. And so when I was able to recognize the pattern of me finding a lot of safety in things that I had self-created inside my mind but were never really a reality, I could start to just make the choice of, okay, but I'm just going to show up today. I'm going to be here today. And it wasn't always perfect. Sometimes I escaped the present moment, but in time and with patience and with a lot of grace, I feel like I've really got into the rhythm of just being in the moment. It's not perfect, it won't be, but the pattern has been shifting, and I feel really, really good about that. And I think that's brought me to the third thing that is going really well in my life, and that is changing the language that I speak. Again, this is a pattern that I've recognized. It's a pattern that I've talked about on here for many years, but maybe didn't live out fully myself. And I say that to relate to you, not to be a hypocrite, but to also show you, like, I'm a human and I'm always changing and I'm making a lot of mistakes. And sometimes what I know takes a while for me to establish as a reality. And I think that's true with everyone. Like, we conceptualize things long before we put them into action. Maybe sometimes we conceptualize way too long. At some point, we have to experience it. But this year, I really started to take action on the language I speak. Because one of the big things that I've talked about a lot in Health Made Simple and what I know is that our bodies are telling a story. Like, your body does nothing without purpose. It's not against you. It doesn't want to be sick, but it's always reacting in a way that it feels necessary in order to keep you alive. Your body is for you. And I think when we start to look at symptoms and signs and problems that we have, or maybe even some of the benefits, and on the flip side, some of the great things that are established inside of our body, some of the things that we really want, right? That's all part of the story your body is telling. And the story your body is telling is not just its own unique story, but it is literally the story of your life. And I found that one great way to understand the story of your life is not necessarily just through what your biology is speaking, but also the language that you speak. Like, the words that you say are a reaction oftentimes to how your mind is working with the body, or based on what the body is telling the mind. Like if your body is feeling unsafe, the language that you speak out is going to be different than if you feel confident and vibrant and alive and safe within your own body. So the language that you speak, the words that you say, actually tells a lot of truth about your overall view and how you're showing up in life and how you show up in your body. And so I've been really aware of what am I speaking and why. And maybe better said, one of the things that I've gotten good at this year that has been really helpful is that I don't just feel things, and try to deal with what I feel, but I'm maybe a little bit more willing to follow what I feel. And not necessarily to just sit in it, but to understand it. Like, why do I feel this way? Why do I speak that? Like, why is that something I'm saying? And when I started to understand some of those things, it really created a lot of clarity about how I was feeling and how my body was responding to life, the story my body was speaking. So maybe to give you an example of this, like what I mean by this is, like I feel like one thing that I've said a lot this year is that I tend to talk negatively about myself, which is not uncommon, right? A lot of people do that. Doesn't mean it's healthy or should be normal, but just talking poorly about myself and about my future. But I also recognize that I talked poorly about other people. Or maybe criticize, more likely to criticize. And most of these were people I didn't know. I could have called it loyalty. I justified it in a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, I feel like our family was in the process of complaining about other people a lot. And I think what I learned in that complaining was that there was a bigger story that was being told that was leading to me talking about other people in that way and really complaining about my life. And I think that there was a lot of internal beliefs, again, like the comparison or not feeling like I was enough, maybe even resisting some of the things in life. And it was just a way to protect me and to protect myself, to stay stuck in the patterns of my past. And really, my body was stuck in those places too. So I recognize that by talking and comparing myself to other people and complaining about other people, I was really living in this victimhood state of health, which is not beneficial for anyone. Like we are not a victim of our health. We're the creator of it. And so when I started to recognize that I was just living in this victimhood, that really meant that I didn't have a lot of power to change. And when I started to focus not on the victimhood of it, but on the creation of health, on what I could create, I started to recognize that I could complain all day about other things, about myself, or I could just do something about it. Like I could just show up. I could just show up and do my best and create the best experience regardless of everyone else. Like really, I started worrying far less about everyone else and their behaviors, and I started to worry more about mine. We've worked on this a lot as a family, and it's definitely something that we need to go and move into better in the new year, and something we're really going to work on because my husband and I have patterned this for our kids, and we're starting to pick up on their creating those patterns of complaining. And perhaps that's why I recognize this was an unhealthy pattern, because it's startling when you hear it out of someone else. Like it's normal. It's even comfortable when you do it. But as soon as someone else starts to do it, you're like, oh, hold up. Like, hold up a second. It's even worse when they start complaining about you, right? Like, you're like, wait, this is my thing. You can't do that back to me. But you start to see that it's really just patterns. And it's not about other people. It's really about you protecting something on the inside of you that needs to be healed, not protected. It needs to be freed, not stuck and repeated. Again, I've been aware, not necessarily just changing the language I speak, but again, following it, trying to understand where is this really coming from? What is the root of this? What is my body? How is my body associated to that language or my beliefs about my body? And really starting to create new language. Again, this is a topic I'm going to talk a lot about in the new year. I'm super excited about this, and also how the language you speak or the story your body tells comes out in the posture of your body, like literally how you stand, how you sit, how you move through life. And I think the majority of us, at least for myself, has lived perpetually in a very collapsed state when that just ignites more scarcity and uncertainty. And I don't want to say maybe even a little bit more self-hate I think we're meant to come in this expansive form. Like we're meant to take up space, to build energy, to be an energetic light into the world. And that means we do have to change our body posture. And again, it's not to say that it's changing your body and that will change your words and that will change your posture. I think they all three kind of go hand in hand. And at different points, you have to really focus on different things. And they can all break and change the pattern. It's just doing what feels safest at the moment. And the last thing that I really felt like was super beneficial this year was the creation of health, the creation of life, the experience of it. And again, I think these are all really related. They're very interconnected, and really everything in life is. It's all kind of working together. And so as I'm saying this, I'm like, I feel like I'm saying the same thing all over again. But that's also the beauty of it, is like, we don't have to change a million different things. Like changing a few things can change a multitude of things. And there's a lot of freedom there if we can see life in that way. And one of those is just, again, being able to experience life has led me to the fact that the experience of life is a lot of what I make it. It's what I create it to be. And that puts a lot of the power back into my hands versus just allowing life to happen around me. To give you an example of this that's been really difficult for me in the past is I've had a really difficult time being okay myself regardless of how everyone else was treating me or feeling, right? Like I am maybe more of an empath. Like I want to fix other people. I want to heal other people. And I partially want to do that because I want them to fix me. Like I need that in order to be well myself. And I've come to the place that is not healthy, and it's not productive. It's not safe because you're perpetually living in an unsafe place, worried so much about how other people are going to respond and show up. And I cannot say that I am at all means healed from this. And like on the other side of this, I still feel like we're in the early stages of doing this, but really recognizing that if I better myself, I think I heard this quote, a better me is a better we, a better I is a better us. And I think that's really powerful because I think that the most selfish thing that we can do is to expect that we can fix other people and live our lives trying to force change, to manipulate change and other people while single-handedly neglecting our part in that. And if we just focus more on our part of the bigger story, I think that we create a better story. Like we can inspire change by changing ourselves. We definitely don't inspire change by trying to create it in someone else. And I feel like that rhymed. Maybe write that down because that is really, really powerful. Like, how can I inspire change in other people is only by changing myself, not by changing other people. And I say that because we are better and we're capable of showing up for other people. And I know the world and maybe even some forms of religion have said that is really selfish. The focus on self is really selfish. But if we get into the biology, it is actually the opposite. Focusing so much on other people is one of the most selfish things that we can do if we are not healed and filled ourselves. And it cannot go both ways. And I think in the process of healing yourself and really coming to a healthy place, then you start to experience life outside yourself. So focusing on self is not necessarily for self-infatuation. That actually happens when you're so focused on changing other people because you don't want to change yourself. But really, when you start to heal yourself, you start to see yourself as a part of a larger story, as a part of this tapestry of life. Like we are created for something bigger than ourselves, and that allows us to get outside of ourselves. But that doesn't happen if we don't have some sense of self-awareness. Which really comes back to, what are the things that I am doing and are they beneficial? Like, how do I create and generate a life that I was created for? And that means we have to do things. We have to take action. We have to create that. And when we start to create that, we change our perspective of that, and that changes how we show up in life. And really, that changes how we live life, regardless of what is happening in the world around us. Really, I've recognized the power of our process or our system. Like not to say and focus so much on what is wrong with us, but just understanding that what we need is not to fix ourselves, because that is impossible, but it is to fix the system. And that means changing and just being willing to pay attention and alter what things are working and what things aren't. Like in the system of my life, what is helping and what is hurting? And using that information to create and inspire change. So those are some of the big things that I feel like I'm taking into next year. Those seemed really philosophical more than they were action-oriented. To make this a little bit more action-oriented, I can tell you that there are some very practical things, like in the things that help generate energy and create safety inside my body, that I'm for sure taking into next year. When we talk about the things that we're doing, I can tell you that one is building strength. Like actually building muscle has been one of the greatest changes that I did this year, was getting back into weightlifting. And I even have started walking with a weighted vest. If you're still in the need of a Christmas present or gifting yourself something with gift cards that maybe you got at Christmas, get a weighted vest or a weighted backpack. Adding some weight to your walks, I feel like has been so beneficial to my health. I worked a lot this year on body posturing. Definitely not there yet, but I'm learning a lot and working on that a lot, of just holding my body in a way that is expansive and not collapsed. Has really helped change my nervous system response. Like I know we talk about regulating our nervous system all the time, but very rarely do we talk about how we can just do that by the way that we stand. And so body posturing has been really good. I've done a lot more work with minerals this year. Minerals are our master communicators of our body. So again, they're kind of translating between your mind and your body, the level of safety that you're living within and the emotions that you're holding on to and those that you're freeing. We're going to talk about minerals. There was a great podcast I had on earlier this year that we talked about minerals and emotions. We're going to talk more about that again moving into the next year. But I did a lot of work with minerals. Honestly, I think they're one of the few supplements that I really do rely on in my daily life. Again, I focus on connections with my spouse, being more open, and then just a few healthy connections with people in my family and my community. I've put more emphasis and focus on slowing down. I think this fast-paced world that we're living in is really restrictive of our human nature, especially in females. And I think one of the things that I did was started to honor my femininity more. And I know that sounds like a really woo-woo word and maybe even a trendy word in this space. But I do think that we have to understand in life and in health, there is very big differences in roles between a male and a female. And what is healthy for each of us is going to vary based on those. And I don't mean like roles of like women need to be in the kitchen, yada, 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 right? I mean like our physiological roles are very different. Women can give birth, can conceive and carry and grow a child. Men cannot. Like we have differences, and I really want to honor those differences. And honestly, when we get into health science, there is no honoring the difference of those. Very few studies have actually been done on women. And so most of our health information, quote unquote biohacking, has come from the understanding of how a male's physiology is going to respond. I have this year spent a lot more time honoring the female physiology of myself. And some of that is just recognizing that when I slow down, doing less in me allows me to do a lot more. I have had one of the most productive years that I have ever had. And I think I attribute a lot of that to just slowing down, creating space, being more creative, tapping into that creativity, and really just honoring the cycle of my feminine nature. Like not beating myself up, not dismissing my cycle, but just honoring it. That doesn't necessarily mean I get into rigid cycle syncing, but just paying attention of it, being aware of it, and just really being aware of how that changes how I feel. And then again, just straight up nourishment. Like not necessarily following any plans, but just how can I better nourish my body? And just paying attention to what things does my body need that I may be not getting enough of. And also like specifically, I know protein again is a really sexy topic, but I really did pay attention to, am I getting enough protein to meet my needs? The same thing with carbohydrates. Am I getting enough carbohydrates and fat in order to really nourish my body in a way that it needs to change its outcomes, to create that sense of safety within my biology? So I did pay attention to those. I did do a little bit of macro tracking just briefly here and there of just tracking of all biological states of my body. I did some blood work. And one thing that I've really loved is glucose monitoring. All of those, not necessarily to be like this doom and gloom situation, but to recognize like I have the ability to change all of this for the better. And I can use these as tracking tools to help me better my life. Not hold me to a standard, not measure me against another bar, but just to help me become better and healthier myself. And so I've loved all of those tools to help me really create changes that have worked for my body. Because health is so incredibly personal. And I think we miss that when we just try to amount to some standard or bar the world has set for us. We miss that. Like that's not the purpose of the scale, of macro counting, of blood test, of glucose monitoring. Like it really is just to understand where your body currently sits, its level of safety and nourishment, and then being able to alter that to help it, to help support your body. So those are some big, like practical changes that I've made in my everyday life. I think it all comes back to I look at my life and recognize what can I do today to help support my body so I can show up as my best and most expansive self, my creative self, my connected self. Like how can I support my body in that way? And there are lots of tools that I'm using to do that. At the Living Well, we're going to talk more about those tools, and I'm going to share a new tool every month that has really helped me this year. But that being said, there's also some things I'm leaving in 2024 that I'm like, okay, this is not helpful and it has not been beneficial for me. And you can probably pick up on some of those based on what I said I'm taking into the new year. And so they're kind of the opposite of those things. But just a few things that I'm leaving behind. One is this idea of biohacking. I have really fallen out of love with this concept. And partly I think it's because it kind of goes against the female's design. We're really not built for quote unquote biohacking because our biology doesn't necessarily work in that way. I understand the terminology of like, how can I better my body? But I think the word like hacking into your biology is just like, it's kind of rough. It's kind of unsafe in some ways. And again, we can use these tools to help our body, but coming at an approach of like, I have to do this dismisses how our body might be responding to that. Because while there are many beneficial biohacking tools, not all of them are beneficial for you. And I learned this in my own healing journey. Like when I was healing, there was a lot of tools that are incredibly beneficial, incredibly energizing. But if I didn't have the capacity, my body could respond in a totally different way. Even though it was quote unquote healing and energizing, it maybe was too fast and too quick of a method that my body was like, hold up, this is too much. And it responded in a negative way. We see this a lot when people just like get on these rash supplement diets or these quick detoxes or what's considered the detox flu. Like you can call it something good, but ultimately that is a response or a sign of your body saying, whoa, this is too much. I do not like this. And it is responding negatively. Like there are some processes I get where we're going to maybe take a step back before we move forward. But we also have to be aware if our body is signaling like it doesn't feel well, it's in a detox flu, that is a sign like this is going too quickly. This is not good for your body. We do not want to overwhelm our body excessively, especially not in the name of health. It's the same thing with stress, right? Like stress is good, but overstressing our body is bad. Water is good. Over drinking water is bad. Eating is good. Over or under eating is bad, right? Like it's finding the balance of healing and honoring that balance of healing. And so I'm kind of letting go of this notion of biohacking. All these biohacking tools might be great. Maybe I'll use them as an energizing form. But I'm certainly not here to hack into my biology, but rather nourish my biology. The second thing is focusing so much on my weight. And I know every year I say like, I'm not going to, I don't even weigh myself. So this is funny, but it's still there, right? Like I still have that underlying belief that what I weigh must in some level create my worth. And this year I've done a lot of digging and following into that. And I actually just realized that it was a bigger issue. And it's one I'll talk about later. I'm not necessarily going to get into here because we don't have the time. I could talk to you about this stuff for hours. I really think at the end of the day, it has a lot of doing with me thinking I need to go backwards in time and rather than just recognizing the value of today. That's going to make no sense right now. Bear with me. What I'm trying to say is I'm leaving the notion of weight loss behind and I'm just going back to how nourished is my body. There are times when I'm like, okay, I definitely feel like the weight that I'm at is not making me feel nourished. It's making me feel heavy and bloated, and that's not healthy. But there's also a place of being too little of a weight, and I've been there before, where I didn't have a libido. I didn't have the capacity for change. I didn't have the flexibility for life. Life was very black and white. There wasn't a lot of color. And so I'm starting to recognize that, or just paying attention to, like, how does my body feel? Do I feel vibrant? Do I hit the biomarkers of healthy metabolic weight? Am I having regular bowel movements? Am I sleeping well? Do I have energy? Do I feel like I'm building muscle? Do I have a libido? Do I have creative processes? Like, am I connecting with other people? Like, do I have capacity for life? Those are great signs over just weight loss. Because I've noticed and I've recognized a lot of people who maybe have experienced weight loss this year, but they're also experiencing other symptoms. So maybe it's just a sign that it's happened too fast, or your body just doesn't necessarily love that. Or maybe you need other forms of nourishment, not necessarily to gain weight, but maybe you need to find ways to nourish your body so that it does feel safe and supported at the weight that it is. Anyways, that's one thing I'm kind of letting go of in the new year, or I want to say changing my perspective on. Because I do recognize weight loss is still important, but it's coming at it from the right perspective and approach. The third thing that I feel like I'm kind of starting to let go a little bit is the excess supplementation or this intense fascination with it. And what I realize is, like, there's always going to be another supplement. And yeah, they might be good. They might be healthy. But I think that we spend so much time looking for the pill to fix us when really we can do so much by just taking action. And the action we take is far more important than the pills that we take. Because supplementation is really nothing more than just trying to supplement an already healthy diet. It cannot fix you. It cannot fill in all the gaps. And it certainly cannot replace just the real life, real food, nourishing movement, healthy sleep patterns, healthy connections that are required to live healthy. So it's not to say that I'm giving up supplementation, but I'm definitely taking an approach that less is best. And the best way to heal is to fill your life with healthy practices and nourishing foods and nourishing rhythms that supply way more than a pill ever could. Again, this is personal to me, so don't feel like this is something you have to take on yourself, but it's just something that I have been thinking more about. Again, by all means, think I'm giving up supplementation altogether, but I think just the fascination with constantly learning about the next best supplement or supplements in general and just focusing more on my everyday life. Number 4 is I'm giving up the victimhood of health. I think I have used this more than I recognized, especially because I experienced such a low point in my health of like really losing my health and being faced with some serious health consequences, that I think in some ways I've still used that as like a bit of a victimhood sense of like, oh, my body has failed me, or I can't do that because my body can't handle that. It has led to this belief that my body is fragile when I know that's not true. Like, the healthiest body is a resilient body. But the only way to build a resilient body is to trust it, to see it as powerful, to expand within it. And that means I cannot be a victim of my health. My body is trying to protect me. It is not hurting me, which means I'm not a victim of it, but I'm also a creator and generator of it by just supporting my body. So I kind of want to let go of like, woe is me, my health failed me, and like really talking less about those points in my life and really just more about the healing points of my life. Again, this kind of goes back to a quote that I heard that it was really good of like in the world of finances, like so many people want to get out of debt, but if But as long as they focus on getting out of debt, they're probably going to stay in debt because debt is the focus. It's what's getting the energy. If you want to get out of debt, we need to stop focusing on debt reducing principles, and we need to start focusing on wealth producing principles. Like, stop focusing on the debt and start focusing on the wealth. And when it comes to health, it's the same thing. We spend so much time focused on sickness and symptoms and our problems that I think that as long as we live in these problem reducing programs, or these programs designed to fix your problems, we'll miss what it means to be healthy because we'll be stuck in our problems. Like, what you give energy to grows. So instead of being stuck in these fix-it programs, I really want to start living for these wellness producing programs, right? Like things that just focus on producing wellness, generating health, not so much getting out of sickness. And if you look at the medical system, right, it's a lot about sick care, not about well care. Like, we go to the doctors because we're sick or because we don't want to get sick, rather than just focusing on the wellness aspect. Like, I just want to live well. And we're really going to dive in more into that because I've done quite a bit of work in the last year on focusing on that, of like building wellness, building health, rather than just trying to prevent disease. And the last thing I want to leave in the past is this idea that I need to rely on convenience or this fascination with convenience. And I think that just puts a bad perspective on time and what time is and what energy is. And yes, on some level, convenience is important, but I think convenience is only important because we're living lives at such a pace that is unsustainable and unhealthy. And so this year, I've started working on generating a pace of life that is sustainable, that leads me longing to not need convenience as much because I have the time and the capacity to create my own, right? Like to build it myself or to cook meals. I don't want to say necessarily like the opposite of convenience food is slow food, but in some ways, being able to have the time and the space to like sit down and have a meal and to enjoy the meal. Like, at the end of the day, history has proven that people are not more productive and creative because they live on convenience foods. We are not getting more done even though we are spending proportionately more time than previous generations have. Overall, we are less productive and less creative and less relational and less happy. And I think a lot of it is because we're living for convenience. We're living in this idea of there's a rat race and that we're going to miss out if we don't work harder. That is not true at all. And it completely dismisses what we actually know to be true about time and its relation to your energy level. And so I am working on creating a life more of slow living. And that doesn't mean I'm saying no to more things. It just means I'm having a better perspective of the things that I do and the time that it takes. And sometimes recognizing that I am being very productive, even though I'm doing tasks that have nothing to do with the thing that I think I need to be productive with. And what I mean by that is I've recognized that when I cook, I'm opening up a sense of creativity, of nourishment, of relationship that is actually serving me and helping me to be productive and creative in all these other areas, which allows me to get more done in less time. And I don't want to just say more done, better things done in less time. So it's just changing my perspective of that and seeing that I don't have to hustle all the time. And I'm definitely not going to miss out on things by hustling more. In fact, I'll probably miss out on more things by trying to hustle. So I'm just trying to embrace more of the slow living, less of the convenience, and understanding when I need convenience or think I need to rely on convenience, what is happening in my life and what can I alter in that moment so that I can come back more into that aspect of slow, nourished living. Which also means changing my perspective and recognizing that slow doesn't mean unproductive. Slow doesn't mean wasteful. Slow doesn't mean lazy. Slow doesn't mean unhealthy. Slow doesn't mean not changing. All of those perspectives that have to shift. So those are some of the big reflections of my year, reflections of where I'm going forward. And I know that's a lot to digest. I've spent weeks digesting this, so I do not expect you to spend 55 minutes and understand fully what I'm talking about. Some of these topics are just like an insight into what is coming. And I'm so excited, maybe more excited in my career than I have ever been. I think part of it is just coming from a place of like truly being myself, of really honoring what I know, and also being willing to like experience it myself and being a light to encourage that in other people. I was thinking about that this morning. Like there's been a lot of years that I've tried to escape this career. Obviously, I quit health for a reason because I didn't feel capable or able. I've spent years wasting a lot of times in activities that didn't matter just to escape what did. And I have to say, like this morning, I was kind of reflecting on some other things that maybe I could have done with my time today, other things that people asked me to do. And I'm like, things that I used to love to do that I'm like, I have no desire to do that because I am just so excited to go work today. And I don't know that I've ever been there, but I do come at the end of this year with a very fresh excitement and a very fresh purpose. And I think a deep-seated need that I want to come and bring you this news. I want to come and tell you these things because I don't think we have time to waste. And I don't want you to waste any more life chasing things that you might not ever find when you could just start creating them today and start experiencing it today. So I am very excited about the year ahead, about talking about energy, metabolism, the bigger picture of life, interconnecting your mind, body, and soul, and really creating a life of health, not because health is the most important thing of life, but because it is the tool that's going to help you live life. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up this podcast. I want to say I love you. Thank you so much for being here. I am honored, and I do not take it lightly that you have spent so much time listening, being here, understanding, and really being gracious as, you know, my health philosophy has changed over the years. And I hope that you'll stick around in the new year. I think that there's a lot of great things coming. I want to help you fully this year in a lot of different ways. And so I'm excited to start offering some new ways that we can relate, some new ways that I can help you, and really take a deeper dive here in the podcast into some topics that I think need some attention and topics that are really going to amplify the change that you create in your life. So again, thank you so much. Again, I don't take this lightly. I'm so thankful for you. And I hope that you take some time to reflect on your year. What things are working well? What things aren't? Where do you want to go next year? And really see yourself in the process of that, of creating new rhythms for your everyday life. Make sure you head on over to thelivingwell.com where you can get more about some of these changes I'm making, and also sign up for The Living Well, where I'm going to be sharing more of my real life, everyday life, and also the place where we can communicate together. There's direct messaging there. There's a place to leave comments, really to start engaging in this process of healing. That is what we need, a community. And I'm the first to tell you, I have not been the best at establishing that. But next year is the time and the place where we can start to work together to build each other up. That is it for this podcast and this year. As we close out this podcast, I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I will see you back here as we kick off a new series on owning your metabolic health in January.